Board of Accountancy. Today is May 17th, and before we start our agenda for today, first I want to welcome everyone. Good morning. And I want to share that we have new microphones in the room, and the way they work is there's a button right in the middle, green and red. So if you tap on it, you can move it if it's on red, or you can turn it on if it's on green. So make sure not to put your hand around it because it disrupts the recording, but you can turn it on and off just by clicking on the middle. Okay? Alright, so why don't we get started? First of all, moving on with the agenda, starting with agenda, item number 1, adoption of minutes for March 22nd, 2018 Legislative Committee meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. We have a second of Mr. Jacobson. Do we have any comments? All right, any public comments? Can we call for a vote?
Okay, Carrie Ann Farrell Hines. Absent. Dan Jacobson.
Yes.
Soshi Leon.
All right.
I apologize.
No worries.
Soshi Leon.
Yes.
Okay. And Carola Nicholson.
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson.
Yes.
And Kathleen Wright.
Yes. Okay, so motion carries. Moving on to item number 2, which is the CBA's 2018 legislative tracking chart.
That's a written report only, so there's no update on that as of now.
All right, well, thank you very much. Moving on to item number 3, and I'll make sure to have the mic as close as possible as well. I know we're learning how to use these. So item number 3, moving on to updates, discussions, and actions on current and upcoming legislation. Ms. Machine, if you can walk us through the
Good
several
morning.
items.
Good morning, everyone. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to highlight some key dates remaining in this year's legislative session. June 2nd is the House of Origins deadline. July 6th is the Policy Committee deadline in the second house, and the legislature spends July in summer recess. The CBA will have another opportunity to take or change a position on bills at its July and September meeting before legislative activities end for the year. Moving on to the agenda, the purpose of item 3 is to present the status of legislation on which the CBA has taken a position. Item 3A is AB 767, and it was amended on April 5th, and it would require that the Business License Center adopt and periodically update a master business license system to allow for the integration of additional licenses to its internet-based platform, and further allow an agency to deny or limit the ability of the Business License Center to establish an application for multiple licenses from an agency through the business license system. Staff recommend the CBA maintain its watch position on AB 767. No action is needed.
Thank you.
Next is AB 2087. This has not been amended, and it would require each state agency to establish modernization goals no later than January 1st, 2020. Staff recommend that the CBA maintain its watch position on AB 2087, and no action is needed as well.
All right, if we can have Mr. Francis, he's going to walk us through item Assembly Bill 2138.
Good morning, and thank you. So first off, to set the stage, I'm going to be requesting that the committee defer this item to the full board. Provide a little bit of background as to why, and also direct you to the fact that in your hand carrying materials, we provide not the bill analysis per se. We provided a new cover memo explaining kind of what the plan is for today, as well as supplemental information that we've been receiving from the author's office and various stakeholder meetings we've been attending related to AB 2138, and then some additional material from a bill analysis from the Med Board and their opposition letter, and a bill analysis from the Board of Behavioral Science. So, as you can see, in the original materials, bill analysis is lengthy, to say the least. I believe it's about 28 pages long. It has, based on the way we're recommending the board adopt certain policy decisions along the way, it has roughly 21 sub-actions to try to make sure we're clearly getting what the board's intent and direction is on some of these various policy decisions. Rather than have that occur at the LC and then having to do it again before the full board, and in the interest of time and to make sure the full board has an opportunity to opine on this, I'm requesting that the LC defer this topic. And I turn it back over to the chair, but this does require a motion from the LC to defer the topic. And I haven't answered any questions members may have.
Just a point of clarification for me. I have the old packet and now the new packet. So is there anything substantially different other than the summary memo at the front?
There's more background information in the summary memo of what we've learned from the author's office and DCA's roundtables. But the other thing, when we go through the bill analysis of the board, if it is deferred, I put numbers next to the actions, so it's a little bit easier to say we're taking action 1 on page 4 and so on. So there's no substantive change in the bill analysis, just the numbering change for ease of use when we get there.
Unless our committee members have any concerns, I think we should take a motion to just bring it up. It's pretty lengthy, so I think for efficiency purposes, we might as well bring it to the.
I move that this be deferred to the full board.
Second. A second. Any comments from the rest of the board, or the committee members, or from the public? Can we take a roll call?
Kathleen Wright,
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson,
Yes.
Corolla Nicholson,
Yes.
Soshi Leon,
Yes.
and Dan Jacobson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so then, moving back to item number D, we can have Mrs. Sheen walk us through.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Moving on to AB 2483, which was amended on April 9th and relates to the indemnification of public officers and employees. This bill would require a public entity to pay a judgment or settlement for treble damage antitrust awards against a member of a regulatory board within DCA for an act or omission occurring within the scope of the member's official capacity as a member of that board. And staff recommend that the CBA take a vote to change its opposed position to support as the bill now relates to the judgments or settlements for antitrust awards against a board member. I'd like to turn it back to Madam Chair for the vote.
Do we have any comments or a motion? Yes.
I have a question on this one, and that is, I think in here somewhere I read that this relates to the Dental Insurance Board, Supreme Court decision, and North Carolina is the case. And I
Yes.
thought that, a remedy to the issues brought up in that case was to simply have a board composed of members such as ours, which is more than half of them are non-CPAs. Which would mean that and then I was getting confused, which is the gist of my question, as to what this would indemnify in the context of antitrust, if we would have already resolved the issue by having a board that is non-partial, so to speak, or, more than 50% non-CPAs.
Do you mind if I speak on this? That was something that was proposed a while ago,
Right.
but there have been a million changes since then. No, maybe not a million, but a lot of changes since then. And currently, this is where we're at. So what you just mentioned about changing potentially changing the composition of board so that it's more public members, then that never happened. So, so right now, this is the only thing related to the North Carolina issue that they've settled on so far, our legislature. Does that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
So that's no longer a remedy, the composition of the board, and now we're going this direction, which is indemnification.
I don't know that it's no longer a remedy, but it's not currently
A bill.
a bill. So, yeah. Who knows? It might come back. I hope not, but I mean, this is where we're at.
Okay, so we're gonna go to support. Is that what you want us to vote on, is to go to support?
Do we have a motion?
I move that, to go to support. It sounds like Senator Newman is being prophylactic in some ways about this. And I move to support the bill.
Do we have a second?
I second.
A second. All right. Any other comments from the public? Can we take roll call, please?
Dan Jacobson,
Yes.
Soshi Leon,
Yes.
Corolla Nicholson,
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson,
Yes.
and Kathleen Wright.
Yes.
Thank you, motion carries. Moving on to the next item.
Thank you. AB 2958 was amended on April 25th to add a section to the government code establishing certain requirements for meetings held by state advisory board via teleconference. This version of the bill does not appear to apply to the CBA statutory committees, as AB 2958 refers to advisory bodies created by formal action of the state, and the CBA's advisory committees are created by an act of the legislature, and the authority for those committees is established in Business and Professions Code. Staff recommend that the CBA maintain its watch position on AB 2958 and no action is required.
Any comments? Yes.
I'm sorry, why would we not advocate or recommend to the author of the bill that we modify this bill to include the committees which are enumerated at the bottom of page 1, in other words, the statutory committees?
Would you like me to respond?
Wouldn't that be, I mean, that would be my recommendation.
I guess it really depends. If you want to make that recommendation, I think that's fine, but consider the changes that are being proposed in the bill. And if you think that those are something that you would like the board's committees to be subject to. So the changes that are being made have different requirements for. Basically, it makes it a little bit harder, puts a little bit more roadblocks up for having a teleconference meeting. So it depends. Do you want that to apply to the committees or no? That's really the basis of whether you think it should apply to them or not, if you like the changes or not.
Okay, maybe I'm very confused. I did not think that teleconferencing was a methodology for holding a committee for these.
It is.
Didn't we vote not to do this?
It's possible, I don't recall, but it's possible that this board just doesn't do teleconference meetings very often, because I don't know of any that you've had in the time I've been your attorney. So it's possible that this board just doesn't do them, and that's why this may not be high on your radar.
Oh, okay, yeah, I don't think I would vote to change anything if this bill would, if we already allowed teleconferencing for these committees. I was reading this, coming to the conclusion that this, the whole issue of teleconferencing and however you manage it was not applicable to these statutory committees because of a vote that we took now several meetings ago, based on a question that actually I had raised with respect to opening up those meetings to a teleconference environment to make it a little easier to attend.
Right, and teleconferencing is an option, and it has been an option with the Open Meeting Act. It's just there's certain requirements. This bill makes the requirements a little bit more strenuous.
Okay, then okay.
So right now, where we stand from our last meeting is to watch it and see how it goes. So, we have a motion. Actually, we don't need a motion if we're just gonna continue with the watch of the session, so unless there's anything else.
Thank you. Next item is 3F, SB 715, which has not been amended and would grant the governor the power to remove any member of a board appointed by the governor within DCA. Staff recommend that the CBA maintain its support position on this bill and no action is required. Moving on to item 3G, SB 795, which would extend by 1 year the current January 1st, 2019 repeal date for the CBA's no notice, no fee mobility program, has not been amended yet. However, staff recently received proposed amendments from the sponsors and are still in the process of reviewing those. Once the bill is amended in line with the CBA's position letter, which can be found in attachment 2, the CBA's position will automatically change to support. Staff recommend that the CBA maintain its support of amended position and no action is needed. Item 3H, SB 921. This bill missed a legislative deadline, and staff recommend that the CBA vote to discontinue following SB 921, and I would like to turn it back to Madam Chair.
So this is just a formality, right? Just taken
Yes.
off the watch off of.
Yes.
Okay, so, makes sense, just a pure formality here. Do we have a motion to dismiss and stop watching?
So moved.
Thank you, do we have a second?
A second.
A second, thank you so much. Any comments? Alright, can we do roll call, please?
Kathleen Wright,
Yes?
Deirdre Robinson,
Yes.
Corolla Nicholson,
Yes.
Soshi Leon,
Yes.
and Dan Jacobson.
Yes.
Thank you, motion carries. Moving on.
Item 3I, SB 984, which was amended on May 1st, and would add a section to the government code to require that the composition of state boards and commissions be at a minimum 50% women. The author's office informed staff that the word directors was accidentally written into the bill, and will be amended to say board member and commissioner. Staff recommend that the CBA maintain its watch position on this bill and no action is needed.
Thank you. Yes, we have a question.
Last meeting, I had asked a question regarding clarification as to why this was not a quota. And it just, in comparison to my years of service in the state university system, we cannot do something like this with respect to university policies. Because it's a quota, and that went all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, I was wondering why this was not a quota.
Looks like a quota to me.
Yeah.
Well, whether it's a quota or not, the boards don't have the authority to decide on their own that it's unconstitutional. It has to come from an appellate court or higher. So even if the legislature does pass a statute that is later found to be unconstitutional, the board doesn't have the authority to not follow it until later, until it's found to be unconstitutional.
No, I'm well aware of that as state policy, and I don't wanna waste time on this, but my question, and in the context of any bill that's being proposed in the state legislature, if someone makes an observation that this might be unconstitutional or a violation of whatever, that, in my view, should be something that would be investigated before the bill proceeds further, so that the state legislature doesn't find itself in the awful position of having a bill struck down as unconstitutional.
And I agree with you on that.
So we didn't do anything, I guess.
Well, as the committee, we agreed to watch, but we're watching how this develops. Okay, awesome. Let's move on to the next item.
Item 3J, SB 993, was amended on May 9th and would impose an unspecified sales tax on the purchases of services. As of this morning, it appears that the bill is no longer moving forward, so.
Oh, really? Oh. Okay. We wanna make sure that we do a vote to, if it's not moving forward, to just stop watching it, so we
Sure.
have it. Yes.
We might wanna wait until it actually, it's formalized that it's
Okay.
not moving forward to remove that,
Okay.
to discontinue.
Okay, so we'll continue watching it unless there's any questions or concerns. Okay, then let's move on to the next item.
Next item is 3K SB 1121, which was amended on April 26th and would authorize a consumer whose personal information has been or is reasonably believed to have been breached to institute a civil action to recover damages not less than $200 and not greater than $1,000 per incident. Staff recommend the CBA maintain its watch position on SB 1121. No action is needed. Next item, item 3L, SB 1159, would exempt CPAs who are current members of the legislature or Congress from the requirement to place the term inactive after his or her CPA designation. Staff recommend the CBA maintain its watch position on this bill as it was not amended. No action is required.
Yes, we have a question. Yeah, Mr.
Didn't we vote to oppose this? We didn't. Okay, I know we discussed it, but.
I think I voted to oppose it.
I did too, but
But
we
it's
did
not
not
we.
collectively. Okay, just making sure.
Thank you.
All right.
Any other comments? Alright, let's keep moving.
Item 3M, SB 1371, missed a legislative deadline and will not be continuing. Staff recommend that the CBA vote to discontinue following SB 1371. And I would like to turn it over to Madam Chair for the vote.
So this one is for. Alright, so do we have a motion to stop watching?
I so moved.
We have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Deidre. Alright, any comments from the public? Alright, can we do roll call?
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Present.
I'm sorry.
Present.
We're
I'm sorry.
taking a motion.
We're doing a motion to stop, watching.
Oh, abstain.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dan Jacobson,
Yes.
Soshi Leon,
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez,
Yes.
Corolla Nicholson,
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson,
Yes.
and Kathleen Wright.
Yes.
Excellent, motion carries. Moving on to the next item.
Next item is item 3N, SB 1492, which is the CBA's omnibus bill, and staff recommend maintaining a support position as the bill was not amended. No action is required.
Any comments? Thank you.
And moving on to SB 1244, which is item 4. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to mention that SB 1244 was amended on May 15th. Currently, the California Public Records Act, or PRA, provides that when it appears to Superior Court that certain public records are being improperly withheld from a member of the public, the court shall order the officer or person charged with withholding the records to disclose a public record or show cause why he or she should not do so. The PRA requires the court to award court costs and reasonable attorney fees to the plaintiff if the plaintiff prevails in litigation filed pursuant to these provisions, and requires the court to award court costs and reasonable attorney fees to the public agency if the court finds that the plaintiff's case is clearly frivolous. As amended, this bill would simply replace the term plaintiff with the term requester. Staff recommend that the CBA take a watch position on this bill, and this concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Do we have any questions or discussions in regards to this bill? Or a vote? Our motion, I move to watch it. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any comments from the public? Can we do roll call?
Sure. Kathleen Wright,
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson,
Yes.
Corolla Nicholson,
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez,
Yes.
Soshi Leon,
Yes.
Dan Jacobson,
Yes.
and Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Yes.
Thank you, motion carries. Moving on to the next item, now let's start. 5B, 5.
5 is a written report only. Thank you.
Then moving on to, that's it. So our, just to wrap up, are there any future items that we wanna discuss in this committee? Seeing none?
I'm sorry, are we doing C? Oh, that's all part of 5.
Yes. We're making sure that there's no new items for future discussion. Okay, seeing none, any public comments?